Welcome, everyone. I'm Doug Alterbeth, the chairman of the board of AntiZionism, and by way of introduction, I want to just point out how amazing it is that this land that we live in has the ability to attract people with their own unique voices, to add to the great dialogue, to the great chorus, to the greatness of this country, each of us in our own unique way. And I say that by way of introduction because I'm very pleased, privileged, proud to have as our guest today David Lange, who is the founder and the creative energy behind Israellycool, which is certainly one of the most impactful and innovative social media sites that has the challenging job of protecting and extolling all the beauty that is Israel. So David, welcome. It's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
And by way of getting started, tell us a little bit about yourself. Let's hear where you come from. You don't have what I would call an Israeli accent. So give us a little bit of bio on yourself.
Well, as you could probably tell from my accent, I'm from Australia. I was born in a place called Perth, Western Australia. Many people know about Melbourne and Sydney. Perth is like the poor little brother, but a beautiful place. And I was brought up in a very Zionist household. And I'll cut through many details. We're not here to hear my whole life story. But at a certain point in time, I decided I wanted to make Aliyah to Israel based on my Zionist energy, let's say. Also because I met a lady who I ended up marrying that was living here at the time. So I made Aliyah coming up to almost 21 years ago, November 2000, right at the time of the second Intifada, if you remember. Timing has never been my strong suit. But be that as it may, I haven't looked back and I love it here.
Yes. So on a chicken or the egg type of question about Aliyah versus getting involved with Israellycool, it sounds like Aliyah preceded your getting involved. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And Israellycool, in a way, came about by accident, believe it or not.
So there was no aha moment, no epiphany of disgust or felt need to say, that's it, I've had it, something has to be done.
There was a bit of that, but I wouldn't say it was an epiphanous moment. There was an epiphany that I had, but it wasn't one of disgust. It was one of, wait a minute, I can make a difference here. In March 2003, I heard about something called blogs. They had just started. This is before Facebook, before social media. Blogspot, if you know what that is. That was one of the first blogging platforms. So I read a news item and I said, wow, this sounds interesting. Some sort of diary. If you look back at my post from March 2003, you'll notice that I wasn't talking about Israel much. I was talking about cricket, which is like baseball, the Australian version, much better, of course, and all sorts of inane things. But the aha moment that I had was when it was around about the middle of 2003 that Israel took out a terrorist called Rantizi, a Hamas terrorist. By taking out, I mean not to a date, but we took him out, we eliminated him. And I wrote about it. So I guess there was this frustration seeping in. I wanted to write about something. At that point in time, my blog was probably only read by 3 people, me, religiously, and then my mum and my dad. After that post, I noticed that my traffic had gone up to double digits. At the time, that was great. And I noticed that someone in Australia had posted, who also had a blog, had posted about my post. Now, this is before social media. So for me, this was like a aha moment. The penny had really dropped. People could actually, without any publicity on my part, get to this post. And it was at that moment that I started dedicating myself more to Israel-related posts, thinking that I could very much make a difference in public perception towards our beautiful country.
If you were to do your mission statement in 25 words or less, how would you juxtapose your original mission statement, the 2003, from where it is today?
I didn't really have a mission statement in 2003. It was just write down my thoughts, and it's a cathartic experience for me. But now I'm much more strategic in what I do. I really want to win over hearts and minds, not preach to the choir. And that's basically my mission statement. I think that was less than 25 words.
Right. So when you say not preach to the choir, because this is really it's an important statement that affects all of us who are trying to help Israel, that we sometimes feel that we're living in a siloed world. And as a friend of mine said to me about my articles, he said, I love what you write, but I get the feeling that you are preaching to the choir. How do you reach outside of the silo? What has been the wisdom that you've acquired, your successful attempt to reach outside of the silo?
Well, I think, first of all, you have to define your target audience. That's really, really important. So
and how would you define yours?
My target audience are people who are either on the fence, people who are basically intellectually honest, not too far beyond the pale, people that can be influenced. And this includes, and a very important part of this target audience are college students who are really under fire, being bombarded with lies and damn lies. Having said that, I just want to make note that it's okay to preach a bit to the choir. It's important. I don't want to rubbish anyone that preaches to the choir, because to galvanize our own side, there is importance in that, to provide impactful information to people that they can use in their arguments with the haters or whoever it is. That's also very important. Patting each other on the back occasionally is important, but it cannot be the underpinning, the linchpin behind what I call Israel advocacy. And it's much more important, I think, to win over hearts and minds. How do I do it? Well, I try to use things like humor, try to be entertaining, relatable, so people see me as a human being and not some sort of robotic persona that just regurgitates facts. Facts are important, but you have to bring in emotion as well, so people will empathize as well. These are some of the things that I do towards this end.
Are there particular issues that you think appeal to the people who are on the fence that they want to learn more about or get other points of view about?
That's a very interesting question. I'll tell you this, that cherry tomato diplomacy isn't something we should be focusing on, if you know what I mean by that term. So it's good to point out Israeli innovations, but at this point in time, I think some people see it as some sort of distractive topic. So we have to get more into the issues. What I think is really, me personally, something I really love doing is bringing up history. And bringing up history, for instance, going back to the New York Times, to the archives, and seeing what the New York Times used to be. I've gotten feedback, or received feedback on this, that this has been very effective, because when we look at the New York Times now, people would argue that it's really gone downhill, but people pay a lot of credence to the New York Times and what they have to say. But by actually, let's say, hoisting them on their own petard, for instance, showing how they were reporting at the turn of the 20th century, I find that pretty effective, and it does resonate with people.
Right. When I said issues, I really wasn't thinking about the cherry tomatoes. I was thinking about hot button issues, sovereignty in Judea and Samaria, Israel as an occupier, Israel committing crimes against humanity or war crimes. Do you find that these are sort of issues that attract people who want to learn more, to get different points of view, or by and large, people have already decided what they think about those?
These are very, let's say, tricky topics, because in order to fully combat the lies that are out there, you really have to have a good understanding, for instance, of international law. And thankfully, we have great people on our side that are able to do it. So if I am writing about such issues, I tend to lean on, the professors on our side and these sort of people. I think BDS is one of the issues which is a hot button issue. It's something that, let's say, appeals to everyone, no matter what your age is. Because for instance, if you're a college student in the United States of America, you're being bombarded with this BDS boycotts, and you have all these pop culture icons, some of which take the stance to boycott Israel. And that's how it attracts some of these young people who hadn't heard of BDS before. So this would be one of the main hot button issues. And I think people realize this also on our side, because we put a lot of energy into this, including the government, our government of Israel.
You get a lot of questions about, say, BDS. What do you think, or particular events? And is this BDS? Does this add up to BDS? That type of a question. I
wouldn't say I get many questions that way. Look, there are plenty of discussions now that we have things like Twitter. There are plenty of online and live discussions. So let's say the traditional way of me getting emails, I'd say that's less of a way that people dialogue with me these days. People usually email me, for instance, to give me a story tip. But maybe there are certain discussions about, oh, check this out, David, is this BDS? But nothing really sort of strikes me at the moment.
One of the issues that I think concerns a lot of people who would say I'm on the fence is there a distinction, and what is the distinction between being anti-Zionist and being anti-Semitic? I assume this is a topic that you handle maybe not frontally, but, you know, in terms of different things that are going on and looking at whether something is in fact anti-Zionistic, anti-Semitic, or more likely both.
Well, actually, funnily enough, I think I do tackle that front on, but I would like to address it. It's a very important topic. So when addressing this topic, is anti-Zionism the same thing as anti-Semitism? I think you have to look at it in two ways. First of all, you want to address, conceptually speaking, is anti-Zionism anti-Semitic? Now you have to look at what Zionism is. And Zionism is basically, as we know, it's a movement for a state, or promoting a state in our historical homeland. It's our right to self-determination. That's what it is. And, you know, many people don't understand what Zionism is. Right. And that's part of the problem. But if you look at it that way, the pure definition of what Zionism is, it's clear to me that it's anti-Semitic. If you're going to deny the Jewish people our rights that all other people will have, that, in a definitional sense, is anti-Semitic. But then you have to look and say, okay, are all people or that define themselves as anti-Zionists, are they actually anti-Semitic? And this is where I tackle it front on. Because from what I do, I have a series on my blog called Anti-Zionist, Not Anti-Semite. And what I do is I look at the social media posts of people that claim that they're, you know, the only critical of Israel, only anti-Zionist. And I look and I analyze their actual posts to see if those posts are anti-Semitic. And I would have to say that in most cases, I would say 95 to 99% of the time, of the cases that I've analyzed, they are really anti-Semitic people. They let the guard, you know, the mask slip. And they're posting all sorts of things, you know, Disturma level caricatures of Jews, anti-Semitic memes, you know, they use the word Zionist, but then they slip and they'll use the word Jew. So on a, let's say, more scientific basis, if I can put it that way, in most cases, I'd say anti-Zionists are anti-Semitic. I say most cases. I tend not to say it's always the case because there are people who are ignorant. And as I mentioned before, Zionism is this word that many people don't even understand. It's like this bogey word that's been misused and misdefined. So for that reason, I would say that you're either ignorant or anti-Semitic if you're an anti-Zionist.
Yeah, well, and also there's the issue of selective enforcement. Why is it that I'm adamant about the way Israel treats the Palestinians as I see it, but I say nothing about the Chinese and the Uyghurs or any other number of situations around the world where there is certainly could be an analogous type of situation? Why is that? And does that lack of interest in other situations, what I call selective enforcement, tend to sort of ring a bell in your mind that this is in fact tantamount to being anti-Semitic?
It definitely is an indicator. And if you look at the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism, it is clearly there. And yeah, you have to conclude that if you're being selective in your outrage and it's all directed towards the only Jewish state in the world, then you're more than likely going to be a Jew hater.
Right.
Yes.
You mentioned your interest in bringing history to bear, which is certainly fascinating and integral to the issue of Judea and Samaria and the issue of, is Israel an occupier? What is the background to Israel being in Judea and Samaria? What is the background of the Arabs being in Judea and Samaria? Do you find that there is an interest among your readers and viewers in delving into this issue, or they want easy answers and catchphrase solutions?
Again, that's a really good question. It's hard to define my audience in a homogenous way. I think there's all sorts of people. There are people that need the quick sound bites, you know, the fast food information, and there are people that do like to delve deeper. So I think I get all types of people. It definitely is one of those issues that there is a lot of ignorance about, and I do get lots of questions about it. And I tend to try to stick to certain terminology. If I do use the word, for instance, words, occupied territories, I would use it, you know, with the quote marks. I would like, as you've been mentioning, to refer to them as Judea and Samaria. So yeah, this is something definitely that people are interested in, and there's a lot of misinformation about. It's a very important topic.
You mentioned, and I noticed on your site, the not anti-Zionist, not anti-Semite. Are there other things that you like to focus in on, to zoom in on, and get people to focus in on?
Absolutely. So there's a thing called Hollywood. I think Richard Lange, famous professor on our side, who coined that phrase, Hollywood. Yeah. Hollywood, the Palestinian Arabs using all sorts of techniques. So I've got, for instance, a whole section on my website about photography. Yes, photography. F-A-U-X.
Right. Fascinating.
Yeah, where I'm looking at images. This is something that happens a lot, again and again. You see images from other conflicts or other parts of the world, or even movies being co-opted to represent Palestinian Arab victims, for instance, of Israeli brutality and these sorts of things. And because it's so prevalent, I've had to dedicate a whole section of my site to it. So that's, for instance, another type of topic I like to delve into, but I see there's a real need. And another one, which is probably one of the, let's say, the most prolific in terms of the amounts of posts I dedicate to this topic, are debunking libels. So when you get, it's similar to the photography, but it's in terms of anything, any sort of claim, allegation against us, which turns out to be demonstrably false. So I basically take the time to prove how it's false.
Do you have a scrapbook of hate mail that you like to sometimes refer to? I know here at Intirt we cherish our scrapbook of articles that say we are actually running the universe and controlling the government, and many of them are coming from mainstream media sources, so it really resonates.
That's funny. You're reminding me of, you must know the Jewish joke then about the two old men sitting on the bench.
Yeah, reading the
That's exactly where your question's coming from. It's not depressing, right? When we own the world and we own the banks, all these things they're saying. So, of course, you're talking about a theoretical scrapbook. Of course, they're more digital now. That's right. But yeah, I do take some pride in that. And I do like, let's say, to use it against the haters. It gives me some koach, some strength. But also I like to kind of poke them with some of the claims against me. Look, I'm joking about it now, but there has been some really nasty things. When I wasn't dedicating myself fully to Israellycool, I worked in high tech. And when people, in the beginning, I used an anonymous identity. I was called Aussie Dave because I was protecting my family. I knew what I was delving into. There were many people that could be out to destroy you. And my identity was found out about 10 years ago. And since then, people found out where I worked, and they bombarded my work. And it was a very large software company with lies about me, claiming I was a hacker and all sorts of things. Now, nothing, of course, happened with that. For start, I was blogging anonymously, and also nothing they said was true. But at the time, going through, it was scary. And I can laugh about it now, but at the time, with a young family, you don't know what's going to be. And then you think, well, wait a minute, they know where I live. Now I look back and let's say it doesn't bother me as much. And as you've asked me, do I look at the scrapbook and read it from time to time? I really do. One of the ones I really love reading is when Roger Waters, the infamous BDS rocker from Pink Floyd, he pointed out my website and he criticized it to Alan Parsons, who happened to be supporting Israel, and he used the article from my website to sort of poke at Roger Waters, and that gave me so much nervous.
Right. Well, that's hitting the buzzer. That's very good. Are there issues that come and go in terms of the intensity of focus and the intensity of interest? For example, do you find that your readers are looking to you to educate them about the viability of the two-state solution, or is there a sense that no, there really isn't a two-state solution out there? Or, what can you say to help us get our arms around the possibility of a two-state solution?
No, I wouldn't say that particular topic comes up as something that people want to, they specifically ask me about. I think what we have to bear in mind is that when I started the blog, there would have been more people coming to me and asking me these questions on a more frequent basis, because there wasn't social media. And there weren't many voices out there doing what I was doing. But now that there's social media, these questions can come up on Twitter on any given day. And anyone can, on our side, or also on the other side, by the way, can jump into that conversation and give their input. So it's a bit hard to answer that question just because it assumes, or at least in my mind, assumes a certain, let's say, way that things work out there in social media. But no, it's very democratized now. So anyone can get involved and answer. And as I mentioned before, people aren't really sending me emails asking me to tackle. These are topics I've tackled many times.
Precisely because, as you say, it's a democratized area and there are more players. Do you find yourself gravitating to a certain niche or to a certain approach or to certain issues to make sure that you stand out or there's a consistency to what your messaging is?
I mean, I don't think that I do anything in order to stand out. Just getting back to, I have it in my mind what my goal is. And again, going back to the target audience. So I want to be true to my goal, which is not to solely preach to the choir. And as I mentioned, the things that I do, I think in some ways I do stand out. The humor, the fact that I get into the sewers with the anti-Semites and I find, dredge up and I'm on the offense. That's important. I didn't mention that, being on the offense and not just on the defense. These are approaches that I've just developed over the years, and I think I'd stay true to those approaches. And whether or not I stand out is up to the reader, I guess.
So is being on the offense, is that news related, or is that big topic related, or is it some combination of the two?
No, I think that being on the offense, by the way, being on the offense and not offensive, if you know what I mean.
You cannot be offensive, I'm sure.
I guess I could if I tried. No, but it's all about not, hasbara, even the word, people make a big point of pointing out that the word hasbara has a defensive connotation to it, explaining. Okay, that doesn't concern me as much. That's just semantics. But there is something to that we have traditionally sort of reacted to things, accusations against us. So my whole approach, as I mentioned, the anti-Zionist, not anti-Semite, really going after the bad guys and pointing out, hey, wait a minute, we're proud Jews. We've got nothing to apologize for. This is our homeland. We're proud. We've stuck out at the olive branch and our hands in peace. And we don't have to always be apologizing. It's an unapologetic approach. Having said that, let's say, for instance, debunking libels. There's a defensive element to that, isn't there? But the way that, for instance, I debunk libels is with an offensive bent. If you're familiar with basketball, in basketball, the team that will normally win isn't just the team that is good in offense. You need to have a good defense, otherwise you're going to leak too many points and the other team could actually outscore you. And it's similar here with Israel advocacy. So when I'm, for instance, debunking libels, I don't just debunk and say this is wrong. I then go, wait a minute, another lie? Look, do you guys see what's going on? These are constant lies, and there's no way you didn't know that this was a lie. Because look, all the proof is there, yet you've gone on this, towards this narrative. This is willful. This isn't ignorance. This is willful, malicious lying. So by doing that, taking the defensive approach, or let's say stance, and turning it into offense, I believe that that's the most effective approach for us.
One of the things Israel's been criticized for is pinkwashing, trying to take certain issues that you mentioned, cherry tomato advocacy. Look how Israel, how gay-friendly Israel is compared to the other countries in the Middle East. Look at the how all the religions here are free to practice their faiths. Is that do you find that that's sort of not a worthwhile approach, that it's going to blow up in your face, or it's worth pointing those things out with the idea that, yes, pointing it out doesn't mean that we don't have issues here, that we don't have problems, but we should be taking pride in the things that we do exceptionally well here.
No, I think we definitely should take pride in the things that we do well. And, again, a bit of cherry tomato diplomacy is okay, but again, it shouldn't be the linchpin of our whole approach to advocacy. But this whole pinkwashing thing is absolutely patently ridiculous. It's absurd. And it's also very anti-Semitic, because you're basically saying that any time the Jewish state does something out of the goodness that seems to be a good thing, we don't have the ability to be good people. It's all with a nefarious motive. So I point out, I point out many of the accusations of pinkwashing, not just the good that we do. I do less, let's say talking about some of the good that we do, although I do some of it, like the humanitarian aid. But I like to poke fun, go on the offense, and attack those that accuse us of pinkwashing, humanitarian aid washing, all these things, because it's absolutely ridiculous. And we shouldn't always be on the defense. We need to attack, and we just have to take a step back sometimes and go, wait a minute, you're the guys that should be ashamed of yourselves.
Right.
We are proud of what we're doing.
Right. Well, you know, it would be interesting. You could create a list of here's all the pretexts, here's all the pinkwashings, whether it is, you know, Haitian earthquake relief or Surfside, Florida,
Yes.
collapse building relief, or water tech emergency relief in Africa. And you end up with a list of 25 things. We're not that smart. If this was all an attempt just to create a pretext, we could get by with one or two and talk about them all the time.
Yes.
But the fact that the list is varied as it is, as
Yes.
comprehensive as it is, has to, you would think, would dawn on people who are on the fence, who are capable of making a rational decision, that, you know, there's something really here, that there is something about this place that brings out this in the society.
No, absolutely. You've hit the nail on the head. And what I'm trying to do is shine a light on this absurd behavior, dishonest behavior, and get these people on the fence, or people who at least are able to use their brain and be intellectually honest, to say, wait a minute, something isn't right. Exactly what you just said. And that is the exact point. And that's what we all need to do more of, I think.
Right.
You know, we tend to, or many of us tend to spend a lot of time, especially on social media, arguing with anti-Semites. You know, dyed-in-the-wool Jew haters are not going to change their ways. I think in all my experience, maybe one or two of the Jew haters I've exposed in the anti-Zionist, not anti-Semite series have actually regretted what they did. The rest have really doubled down. So, no, but I do think it's an important point I want to raise in this regard, that I do, let's say, have dialogue on social media, for instance, with anti-Semites. I don't let it drag out too much, but the only purpose I engage in that dialogue for is to shine a light on the anti-Semites, how unreasonable they're being, how dishonest, how disgusting, racist and anti-Semitic, for the benefit of the reasonable people out there who are our real target audience. So I just implore everyone who's watching this and who might not have given it too much thought to always bear that in mind, that you really want to target those who have a chance of being redeemed.
So we've been talking about social media. What's your take on media? What's your take on, let's start first with the Israeli media. Do you think Israeli media gives Israel a fair shake? Certainly in terms of how it's portrayed, how they seek to portray us to the rest of the world?
Well, Israeli media, of course, is quite diverse. And, you know, for instance, if you're going to ask me about a media outlet like Haaretz, the answer is very clearly no. And in fact, they're part of the problem. Many anti-Semites, not just people critical of Israel, use Haaretz articles actually against us, to attack us, to bludgeon us. So they're on one extreme, and there's other such outlets. You've got more middle-of-the-road outlets, and I'm not going to, you know, I don't want to get you into any legal trouble, so I'll just leave it unspecific and vague, which do an okay job. But one of the things I've noticed for a while is many of them take AP or AFP reports word for word from the wires, and they don't analyze what's being said. So they use all the terminology, the troublesome terminology, for instance, occupied territories, settlers, things like that. They're already putting us on the back foot just by parroting the wire stories. It might not be something that they're doing consciously, but if anyone from the media is watching this, again, think about what you're doing, because that's also damaging. Just by, you know, the seeping language changes.
That's very good point. Matty Friedman had a fascinating article several years ago about his tenure at the AP. And he pointed out that the AP Bureau, the Israeli AP Bureau, was larger than just about the entire rest of the Middle East combined. And that there was this intense focus, which often was laden with buzzwords and buzz concepts. Does it seem like the world is just fascinated with us, and not in a, you know, gee, attaboy kind of way, but there is a fascination with Israel, and that must pose a great deal of challenge to, you know, you and others like you who are really trying to get people to see, you know, look behind the media buzz on this, and there is a more objective reality to be perceived.
Yeah, no, absolutely, it's a huge problem, and, you know, of course, I engage in you know, pointing and shining a light on the media bias, but you have great organizations like Honest Reporting and Camera. The fact that there are whole organizations dedicated with the sole purpose, or at least the main purpose, of correcting the media tells you all you need to know. I mean, if there wasn't, that would be out of business if that wasn't the case. Honest Reporting started, I think, in 2000, based on this horrible incident that happened to a young Jewish man that was portrayed as a Palestinian Arab that had been bashed by Israeli soldiers. So it's a problem. It's been a problem. We just have to keep on their back. But almost every day, this is another one of these hot topics that I'm dealing with, that I have to correct something. And there's many, let's say, different extremes of bias. There's very blatant bias from some organizations which actually don't care. They don't seem to care. They're pretty proud of their bias. Then there's this sort of more subtle, nuanced, but quite very dangerous bias, whether it's with terminology or little things put into articles, almost as an aside. There's also bias by omission, when you're not mentioning something of great contextual value, which would portray the true situation. So it's definitely something we all come up against, and it hasn't, let's say, improved over the years.
Has COVID been a boon for you? Just in the sense that, not that you're morbid or wishing harm onto people, but I mean in the sense that you had people who were homebound, who were computer bound, who are not traveling around as much. Have you seen a marked increase in viewership and visitation because during the time of the virus?
I wouldn't say I have, actually. Although it's funny you should mention, being a boon, because there have been times when I received much greater viewership. Like, for instance, in the second Lebanon War, I used to joke I was a war profiteer. Right. And so I do have a morbid sense of humor. Because and by the way, that was before Twitter was really a thing. So people were actually coming to my blog. I was doing live updates, and really I was one of the only sources back then. Right. And interestingly enough, I've seen that, even Times of Israel and other news outlets have adopted this more blog-like live update approach for certain events, which is very interesting. But no, I wouldn't say it's been a boon. I'll tell you what it has been a boon for: anti-Semitism. I've noticed that there are all these conspiracy theories, of course, are coming out. Absolutely. And there's more. Let's say I'm busier than ever trying to deal with anti-Semites. But I wouldn't say that there's been an automatic increase in viewership.
Yeah, no, I would say as an old guy and as a more or less old-fashioned Jew, I look at these stories coming from my native America, and I see this Jew, that Jew, this Jew in a very prominent and often very negative place. And I say, this is not good news for the Jews. And there are a lot of people who are now connecting the dots, whether it's about COVID, whether it is about any number of political issues, and I think you're absolutely right. It has been open season for anti-Semitism, and it's a challenge, and it's probably a great challenge that you live with every day.
The thing about anti-Semitism is I don't think it's rational. It's an irrational hatred. Right. When you're talking about prominent Jews, I mean, you have prominent Jews on every side of the political spectrum. Right. So if there's someone who's very, very left-wing, a socialist, communist, who happens to be Jewish, they've done something, they're anti-capitalist. Okay, people will use them and say, oh, we disagree vehemently, they're bad, they're evil, what they're doing, Jewish, all Jews are evil. And you get it from the other side. Right. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Many people, for instance, point to George Soros. The irony is, and many anti-Semites point to him, but he maybe I shouldn't say this, but I guess you can edit it out later. But, I find him very problematic myself. Many of the things, he funds many of these, Breaking the Silence and all these sorts of organizations, doing us great damage. Yet people that hate Israel and who are anti-Semites, they also bludgeon him a lot. So you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. It's always going to exist. We can do everything we can to fight it, but I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
No, it's the gift that keeps on giving, and it gives in all seasons. And we are the vermin that rules the world. How does that happen? How does the lowest of the low manage to run the, that's the...
I wonder why, I have a Mishkanta mortgage if I own the banks. I mean, I missed the memo for the last Elder of Zion meeting.
I say that all the time to my wife. I said, if Im Tirtzu is running the country, why are we standing in line at the post office like every other jerk?
Right, and I mean, we're supposed to be so smart, right? But if we're running the world and the country, we're
doing a terrible job.
Exactly.
Why are we doing a lousy job?
Yes.
So where would you like to be? Where do you want Israellycool to be a year from now? What do you see? What's your goal?
Right. Well, I actually formed, so Israellycool, as you've mentioned, has been a blog. It started off as a website. But last year, you might not know this, but last year I actually, I was in high tech, as I mentioned. I quit my job in high tech to fully dedicate myself to Israellycool. So I set it up as a non-profit, Israellycool Israel Advocacy. So as a non-profit, I want to be able to fundraise and to be able to actually expand. And what that means is, at the moment, it's pretty much a one-man band, me. And I want to be able to bring on more people, be able to remunerate them. I want to get more into the, like you're doing now, fantastically. Get more into the video medium. Of course, people still read, they still read,
right.
But there's more and more, bites of information.
Yes.
And I think the video medium is very effective. So this is something I want to get more into. Basically be able to dedicate more of my time to this what I think is a very worthwhile endeavor and something I'm passionate about.
Very nice. So that would include other media. You would do,
yes.
You'd like to do, like you say, things like we're doing today, and
well, absolutely. Look,
panels.
One day I would love to have a talk show. But
right.
I mean, we'll start from the ground.
So, are you a Chapter 46 Amutah here in Israel and a 501c3?
So I'm working on Israel. It takes a while to get to that point. In about 6 months' time, I'll be able to offer tax deductions. It's a shameless plug time to people in Israel. But I actually work with non-profits in the United States. So if there's anyone watching this that believes in what Israellycool is doing and would like to lend a helping hand, and you're a US citizen, or, you don't have to live there, but you can be a US citizen, then you will get a tax deduction.
Terrific. Yeah. So that's, hopefully that's something that we can post so that people will know how they can support you as we do. We want to support you. We really appreciate your coming by today to share, your thoughts, your energy, your vision, and, we wish you only good things for the future, and thank you so much. I'm Yisrael Chai, and Yisraellycool Chai.
Thank you so much. It's been an honor.